In this video, we'll be talking about the different enhancements and changes to the project accounting module of MYOB Advanced Business as part of 2021.1. So for an agenda, we'll be covering three things. First would be the new feature that allows you to activate or deactivate an account group. Then we'll take a look at the changes that have happened around how closed commitments are presented on the report. And finally, we'll take a look at the new feature that allows you to nominate a different cost and sales account or sub-account for a project. Now let's take a look at the enhancements around the ability to activate or deactivate an account group. So with 2021.1, you're able to set an account group either as active or inactive through a tick box on the account group screen. What it does when you deactivate it is it prevents you from using the account groups for all sorts of project transactions, which includes creating budget, cost budget, or revenue budget lines. Now, the deactivation of an account group can only work, and the system will only allow you to do it if you've already unlinked the accounts previously linked to it. Here's an example of an account group for travel that's currently active, so therefore it's usable for projects. If I decide to temporarily or permanently prevent the use of this account group, I can simply disassociate the accounts linked to it and then untick the active button. Now, if I go to a project and attempt to use that account group, I should no longer be able to find it in the account group list. Likewise, if I created a project transaction, that account group will not be available for selection as well. This will hold true for when you use your create transactions that use the account previously associated to this account group. Now, the reason the account group is deactivated as opposed to deleting it is that it can still be used for the historical information that we have on projects. Our next topic would be around the closing commitments. Now, the changes as it relates to commitments in 2021.1 centers around the commitment screen. So within that screen, new columns have been added for status, committed variance quantity, and committed variance account. Likewise, there have been some changes in how the values are computed for some of the columns. And these columns would be the received and invoiced quantity and the open quantity and amount. Here we have the commitment screen. And first, let's discuss the three additional columns on the table. So first would be the status. This is just taken from the status of the purchase order or the subcontractor line. So if the closed indicator is selected for that line, it will appear on the status column as closed. Otherwise, it will be open. The committed variance quantity is the difference between the revised quantity on the PO or the subcontract and the invoiced quantity. The committed variance amount, on the other hand, would be the difference of the revised amount and the invoiced amount. Now let's look at the columns for which the calculations have changed. So committed received quantity shows us the quantity that has been received for the purchase order or the subcontractor line. The committed invoice quantity shows us the invoiced quantity for the subcontract or the purchase order line, while the amount shows as the invoiced amount for the line. In the case of AP bills in foreign currency, this will show us the amount in local currency. The committed open quantity will show the lower amount between the difference of the revised quantity and the received quantity, or the revised quantity and the invoiced quantity. For the committed open amount, if no item is used or the non-stock item being used is set to close the PO based on by amount, the amount will show the difference between the revised amount and the invoiced amount. If the item being used uses the close by quantity setting for the close PO line, the value is computed by dividing the revised amount by the revised quantity to get the unit cost and multiplying that to the committed open quantity. If the open quantity is 0, then the amount will again be computed from subtracting the revised amount, the invoiced amount from the revised amount. To find more details on how the calculations are made, please refer to the release notes for 2021.1. The next enhancement is around the ability to define a default cost account and sub-account for a project. Now, prior to 2021.1, we were able to define a default account and sub-account for a project, but this related to the sales transactions. Starting 2021.1, we have the ability to define a separate account and sub-account for our costs. This then will allow time cards or expense claims to be posted to the default cost account and sub-account for the project, which will serve a purpose when it comes to financial reporting, because you'll be able to aggregate multiple costs from multiple projects into the same account or the same sub-account. Now, looking at our settings tab on the project, we can see now that we have distinct accounts for sales and for costs. And if you drill down to a task, we can break it down at that level as well if that's needed. Let's stay on this project as an example. So we've set the default cost account to be our general admin expense account. And what I've done is I've created a time entry for 3 hours against the project. Now, if I look at the corresponding project transaction for that time entry, since I've set my time and expense preference to capture the default account from the project, it took my default account regardless of what account had been set for my labor cost code. Now let's look at the different configurations and settings where these default accounts will apply. First, with the billing rule. So now when you select on the billing rule to set the sales account from the project, it will take it from the sales default account. You also have the ability to do it to get it from the task. If you need to bill each task, allocate each task's revenue separately. And you also have the ability to define your sub-account to get your sub-account from the default project or the default task sub-account for sales. For allocations, you're now able to take your sub-accounts from the default project cost sub-account or task cost sub-account or the project sales and task sales sub-accounts. On the project preferences, as we've seen on our example, you can set it up so that all of your labor expenses get charged to the cost account set for your project or your task. You can also combine your sub account from the project default cost sub account. On the accounts payable preferences, you'll be able to combine your expense sub account default from the project to be used for your AP bills charged to the account, to the project. The same applies on the time and expense preferences, where you can now select whether you want to take both your sales or expense sub accounts from your project or task defaults. That concludes our presentation of the different features of project accounting. Thank you for watching.